Welcome back to Eat Sleep Boxing Repeats YouTube channel. Delighted to be joined by Owen. We are doing the big fight breakdown for George Kambosos Jr. versus Devin Haney, the undisputed lightweight championship of the world. Another big fight, another undisputed fight. We've had however many undisputed fights so far this year, but here's another one, and we're here to discuss it. First of all, Owen, how are you? How's things? What's been going on with you?
Nice one, Elliot. Thank you, mate. Delighted to join the team. First off, we wanted to get back into boxing content for a long time now. It's brilliant to be getting involved. I'm okay, mate. Been looking back through Devin Haney's career in preparation for this. Ready to be heavily critical over the young American. But yeah, ready to go.
We'll get straight into it then. So Devin Haney, both undefeated fighters now. Devin Haney now 27-0, so he's actually had a decent amount of fights now, despite being fairly young. 15 KOs, so he can punch a bit. However, I feel like most of his recent fights have gone the distance. How would you evaluate his career so far? Just in a nutshell, obviously, he is a world champion. He has beaten good names, but he's not had a big fight, in my opinion. He's not had a fight against one of the four kings, however cringy that phrase is. He's not had a fight against Ryan Garcia, Teofimo Lopez, etc. But what are your thoughts on his career so far?
Well, my main thoughts on his career so far is this is coming of age in a sense. I know he's still quite young, but to have 27 fights, heavily talked about prospect. I don't think the caliber of opponents, bar his last three, even the hardcore boxing fans will struggle to name the majority of his opponents. I thought the Gamboa fight sort of set the bar for his career, got the ball rolling. He took on Linares. I mean, I will always say Linares is one of my favourite ever boxers. I love what the bloke does, but he took on an aged Linares. I wouldn't say he's had his soul ripped out, but in that aspect, but an aged Linares who isn't the same Linares that absolutely beat Kevin Mitchell to a pulp. He wasn't fighting that Linares, but again, names are important on resumes. That was a name he added. And then Jojo Diaz, which I did think was a good win, comfortable win as well. So I feel like his resume is okay. But if he can get the scalp over Kambosos, I feel like that's the first big name and his first big win of his career, and that will take him to new heights. So his career so far, it's been decent. 27-0, you can't fault anyone that's unbeaten. But now with Kambosos, that's it now. I don't want to see low-level fighters. If he has to fight a mandatory, he fights a mandatory. But I want the big fights. I want the Teofimos, Lomachenkos, even potentially someone like Ryan Garcia. Get him in with them all.
That'd be good. I think this is maybe a difficult question, but people had opinions over it. In terms of these top four fighters, i.e. Haney, Ryan Garcia, Teofimo Lopez, Gervonta Davis, have you got can you tell me one who you expect to stay undefeated for the longest?
The one I would say, there'll probably be someone that will criticise me for this, but I think it's Tank. I really think that they have held him back, but I feel like Mayweather knows. Sometimes when you get like Eubank Senior involved with Eubank Junior, it didn't work out. But Mayweather's one of the greatest to ever lace a pair of gloves up. I feel like Tank's got a great mentor. He can also help with training, sort of thing. But I do feel like Tank, for his size, he's got great power. He can box and move. But the only issue I have slightly with Tank is whether he goes off track, whether that loses his head, whether he gets too cocky, who knows. But I do personally think it will, out of them all, it would be Tank. I don't think Ryan Garcia has really fought anyone yet, and if he fights Isaac Cruz will take his head off.
Good all right, to the point. You're not holding back at all. I like it. But also depends like who you're going to fight, and if you're gonna if you're not going to avoid the big fights in which you could be in trouble for, there's a good chance you're going to remain undefeated. So we'll see how things pan out over the next year or so. Just hope to see these big fights. Moving on, George Kambosos' last fight, big upset against Teofimo Lopez, won on points out in the States. drops Lopez in the first round, which kind of shocked everybody. I think most people, or pretty much everyone, apart from Teofimo Lopez and his dad, would agree that that was the right decision. He kind of that Kambosos deserved to win that fight. What were your thoughts on that fight? How impressed were you over that win over Lopez? Give me your thoughts.
I was, to be fair, I wouldn't say I was baffled by it. I know Kambosos is hard, simple terms. He's a warrior. I mean, his tattoos show it all, sort of thing. But I did think Teofimo would win, and I was proved wrong. Teofimo against Lomachenko for one, head and heart, that one. So in my head, I was thinking Teofimo is going to win this, but in my heart, I love Lomachenko. I was like, I've got to go with Loma. Teofimo got the victory, and I think that may have gone to his head. In the build-up, he was telling Kambosos, I'm going to take you out in the first round. It won't go past one round, and he come out firing, and it backfired. And I do think the game plan went out the window. I don't think he was listening, because he expected to bomb him out, and he got dropped. And I thought Kambosos was pretty much punch perfect, to be fair. Very slick operator. I like the fact he was going in, head down sort of thing, having almost like a little war, then leaving his chin high, then boxing and moving in and out. So he was doing it all for me. I'd watched his fights. I knew he could box, but that win did surprise me. So the fact Teofimo beat Loma then went on, and his last fight was absolutely fantastic. Teofimo goes on to Kambosos. Kambosos beats Teofimo. So I feel like that win has just sent the division spiraling, and it's opened it up brilliantly. But I just think tactics were wrong completely. And take your loss like a man. Teofimo and his dad. I don't think his dad helped the situation, but I'm not sure how you scored it. But I had Kambosos quite comfortable, to be fair.
Yeah, like I don't think there's any doubt who won that fight. I think a question for me is that what happens with Teofimo Lopez next? Is that just kind of a stumble in the road? So I do think he's a top fighter. It's just, and I think it's a question over weight as well. Was he done at the weight? That sort of thing. So we'll see what happens with him. But yeah, just a great kind of victory for Kambosos Jr. and an important one as well. I feel like we need upsets. We need upsets in the sport. We need performances like that. But unreal performance. Fight of the year contender for last year for sure. Moving on swiftly, just want to know what you think each fighter needs to do to win this. We're going to get onto predictions in a little bit, and really interested to hear you on for this, because I think near enough a 50-50 fight here. What does Devin Haney do? It's a particularly tricky one because both fighters haven't lost. So saying how both fighters can win or lose when neither of them have actually lost is a tricky one. But yeah, interested to hear your thoughts on this one, Owen.
Personally, I think Devin Haney needs to box and move. We've seen Kambosos, Teofimo, when Teofimo come out swinging and firing, and he wanted to stand and he wanted to knock him out, and he weathered the storm and dropped him throughout the storm. So I think if I'm in Devin Haney's camp, I'm looking at that fight especially, and thinking if George Kambosos drags Devin Haney into a war, it only ends one way, in my opinion, and that would be a Kambosos victory. I think if it went to a war, if the chins are high, guards are dropped, I do think Kambosos would stop him. I think Devin Haney has to take shades of Money Mayweather and not Pretty Boy Floyd. I know that can be quite a common term used, but he needs to box and move. He needs to stay away from the firefight. I personally haven't seen a Devin Haney involved in a firefight, so it is difficult to comment how he would come out of it. But on that aspect of it, I think Devin Haney definitely needs to use the sweet science, get in, get out, and move. I think fitness will play a major part in this. They're both fantastic operators. They're both great professionals. So I'd imagine they'll be going into it in tip-top shape. But I do think Kambosos needs to get in close and try and drag Devin Haney into the trenches, turn it into a firefight. Again, in and out for Kambosos, but I feel like he needs to get in close. I think Haney will be slightly the bigger man, Not by massive amounts, but every inch counts. So he needs to use his reach, he needs to use his jab, and essentially needs to stay clear of Kambosos. I know it can sound easy on the tin, but when you've got someone who can do what you can do and can go into the trenches, it can be a very long 12 rounds. So I don't know about yourself, but I definitely think Kambosos needs to get in close. Loads of combinations, plenty of, probably use the body a lot to try and tire Haney out, and then the opposite side of that, Haney needs to get in and get out, box and move. Personally, what about yourself?
It's a tricky one. I think it's here's
a tough one.
Yeah, it's a tough one to call. I think Haney is the more, you play to your strengths, right? And I think Haney is the more skillful fighter, and I think that he can, I think the way he wins this fight is on points.
Yeah,
I think that he does what he did against, maybe not Linares, but Jojo Diaz and Gamboa, but just to a higher level, to a better extent. And I do think he's good enough to do that.
Yeah, so I agree on that.
Yeah.
I just think, like we say, from what we've seen with Kambosos in his last fight, Haney needs to use, like you say, the shades of the Jojo Diaz fight and get in and get out.
Yeah, and it's a tricky one, but I think that Haney does have the upper hand. But I think the fact that we haven't spoken about, the fact this fight's happening in Melbourne, which we don't really get big massive fights happening in Australia. Boxing does exist in that part of the world, but it's not like you would get a big US star in Devin Haney going to Australia. And I wonder if that could have an impact as well, and therefore have an impact, if it's a close fight, could that have an impact on the judges' scorecards as well, which we've seen happen, particularly in this country as well. Cool, interesting stuff. Last but not least, going to ask for a prediction from you, Owen. I know it's not easy to do. Just kind of want to make it clear to people, this is a prediction at a couple of weeks before the fight. This is not predictions can change at the press conference, at the weigh-in, 10 seconds before the first bell. But interested to see what your prediction is for this fight.
What I'm going to go with, I do personally think the Australian judges won't be like the British judges. I'd imagine Haney won't be going into the fight a judge down or 3 rounds down. And at the minute, it's not like 100% or 90% sure. It's probably more 51-49 type thing, but I'm going to go Haney points. I think it will be interesting to see on the flip side how Kambosos handles being the star. He's walking out in front of his home crowd to become the undisputed champion of the world in such a short amount of fights. It is fantastic. And kudos to Devin Haney for being a brave man and taking the trip out there. We need more of it in boxing. So take my hat off to him, and I absolutely love the fact he's done that. But I am going to go with Haney points. Not comfortable, 2 or 3 rounds, but I think he will just about edge it.
And I think that one thing that he will get credit for is going, if he does win, is going and doing it in Australia. I think that's not an easy thing. That's not an easy thing to do. And doing it against someone who's just had such a massive win, not an easy thing to do. I'm going to agree with you. I do think Haney, I do think on points. I think it should be a great fight. I do rate Kambosos highly. I do think but these are 2 top 5, maybe top 3 lightweights. I just think Devin Haney, to summarize, like, Devin Haney is a special fighter. He's just perhaps not shown it yet in his career, but I expect him to show it in this fight.
And not just because I've said I think he'll win on points. I do hope Devin Haney wins, because then I think it opens up the lightweight division again. Because I do think Haney has been trying to get the fights. I do honestly believe he hasn't been shying away, but I think it's the other way around where people don't want to fight him. So now if he wins all the bouts, no one's going to have a choice. Everyone's got to fight him. And then it opens it up. If Kambosos loses, do we go for the Teofimo rematch? Where does Lomachenko come back into the equation? So either way, we've got a brilliant fight on our hands. I'm glad it's in Australia. and I can't wait for it really, because it just opens up a fantastic division.
Yeah, so many ins and outs. And they're definitely a unique fight. And yeah, the fight to look out for in the month of June for sure. Owen, thank you for joining me. Appreciate you being so honest. And yeah, really looking forward to this fight now. George Kambosos Jr., Devin Haney, Undisputed Lightweight Championship of the World, happening in Melbourne, Australia, 4th of June. Owen, thanks very much.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.